Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Claudia. Thank you so much for being here. So we so often hear that eating healthy is expensive. However, I wanted to show you that that doesn't have to be. I have a full week of family dinners for you for under $5. That's for the whole family for under $5. Now, of course, it depends on where you live. Where we live, food is very inexpensive. If you live in Hawaii, for example, these dinners might be slightly over $5. But what I did when I didn't quite know, I put in the computer how much does this cost in California. So this is an average of $5. Might be a little over, might be a little under, depending on where you live. Regardless, all these meals are super economical. They're also super delicious and super easy to make. But before we get started, I wanted to follow up really quickly on a video I made on why I cook without oil. Now, of course, if you've seen my recipes, you know I cook without oil and you know how easy it is. And because it is so easy and because I actually prefer the taste of oilless cooking, I cook without oil. And I do believe the studies we have that say that all oils, including olive oil, are not good for us. However, I also don't stress myself out over it. I do eat oil here and there. When I go out here in Italy, it is impossible to avoid. People think that olive oil is gold. I also have some store-bought hummus in my fridge that has oil in it. So I do the best I can. However, I do think that if we stress over something, that stress is more detrimental to our health than the actual thing itself. So I do the best I can, and I think that's all of us can do. So please don't stress over it. You know, if you can cook without oil, I do think it's healthier, I do think it tastes better, but do the best you can, don't stress over it. And of course, make sure that you're getting all your healthy fats from nuts, seeds, avocados, and those sort of things. So without further ado, oh wait, there's one more thing. All the recipes, as always, will be in the description box. Click the little arrow and they will all show up. So without further ado, let's make some economical family dinners. So we're going to need a sweet potato, which is about $1.50, some onion and garlic, let's say 50 cents, that's $2. We have a can of coconut milk, that's another $1, so we're at $3. A can of diced tomatoes, which is 50 cents, we're at $3.50. I have about 50 cents worth of frozen peas right here, so we're at $4. And then I have some chickpeas here, quite a few chickpeas. I cook these in my Instapot, so they're really cheap that way. They're about 50 cents because this is about a third of a package. Now, of course, if you get them in a can, they'll be a little bit more expensive. But the way I made this meal, it comes out to about $4.50. So we're going to, of course, start with peeling our onion as well as the garlic and then dicing the onion and mincing the garlic. As always, of course, you can use a garlic press if you want to. I like mincing it by hand. I find it therapeutic. Once we have that, we're going to saute it in just a little bit of water, as always, until the onion becomes just a little bit translucent. And in the meantime, we are going to cut our sweet potato into small pieces. Now make sure that they're sort of the same size because you want them to cook evenly. So if you have really big pieces and then really small pieces, they're not going to cook evenly. But don't stress yourself out too much, just do the best you can. We're going to put that with the onion and the garlic, mix it up nicely. Then we're going to add our chickpeas as well as our peas, the diced tomatoes, and the coconut milk. And then what I forgot to mention is, of course, spices. We need some spices. So we have some turmeric here, we have some cumin, some salt, and some red pepper. Now it's hard to figure the cost of the spices, but if they're 50 cents, then we're just up to $5 for this. So we're going to mix all of that well. And then I decided to just add a smidge of water because I wanted my potatoes all the way covered so they would cook. So see how many potatoes you have. If they're covered with all the liquid, you might not need the water. And then we're going to bring that to a boil and cook it until the potatoes are done on low. And this is what it looks like. It was absolutely delicious. You could have this on rice or just like that. These bean burgers, along with the potato wedges, I call them fries, but they're really potato wedges, are one of my absolute favorites. And they're so economical. I am using beans that I cooked in my Instapot, so they are about 90 cents a bag, and I'm using half of the bag, so less than 50 cents. A kilo of potatoes was $1.50. We're using about a quarter cup of oats, so that's hardly anything. I'm using 2 carrots, a little bit of ketchup, and a little bit of mustard, and then just a few spices. We're going to take all of our beans and put them in a bowl. Now, I really should have used the bigger bowl here, but you live and learn. So we're going to put those in there, and then with a fork we're going to mush about half of them up. So we want to leave about half of them intact and half of them we mush up. Now of course there's no exact math, but we want to have some of them intact. And then I'm going to add my spices. Now I decided to use garlic, onion powder, as well as some sriracha because I wanted it to be a little bit spicy, but you can add whatever spices you want to this. And then we're going to grate our carrots in here. Now the carrots are really optional, but I really think that they just make those burgers nice and juicy. I used to make them without, and they just were a little bit dry. Then we're adding our oats, the mustard, as well as the ketchup, and we're mixing this up really well. And this was just a little bit wet for me, so I decided to use just a few more oats here. So you want this to be, you know, if you've made hamburgers before, you want that to be sort of that consistency, not totally soggy wet, but also obviously not too dry. So we're mixing this up nicely. I'm using about altogether a half a cup of oats here, but like I said, all the recipes will be in the description box. And then we're going to make some patties and put them on a lined baking sheet, and I made 6 of them. And we're also going to cut our potatoes. Now I like to cut mine into wedges because I like when they're crispy on the outside and just a little bit soft on the inside. If you want to make fries, just make them a little bit thinner. But make sure that you cut them all about evenly so they cook evenly. And then we want to spread them out nicely, making sure there's just a little bit of space between them. We're adding some salt and we're putting that in the oven for 40 minutes, but halfway through we're going to flip the burgers and maybe even the fries. And this is what it looked like. It was absolutely delicious. For this delicious fried rice, we're going to start with some brown rice that I happen to have left over, but of course you can cook it fresh. And then I happen to have some broccoli and bell peppers. You can use whatever vegetables you want. I also have some corn, a little bit of garlic, and a small block of tofu. So we're going to start, as always, mincing our garlic and then sauteing that in just a little bit of water. And while that is doing its thing, we're going to cut our vegetables. Now you can break the broccoli into florets if you want to, but I wanted it to be just a little bit finer. And then of course we're cutting our bell pepper, and I'm throwing all this in the pan as I'm going along. And I always say this, if you're more organized than me, you can cut this all ahead of time. I just always do it as I'm going along. So we're cutting all of this, adding it all to our pan. If it happens to stick, you can just add a little bit more water to it, or you can also use vegetable broth. And we're going to saute that until the vegetables are a little bit soft, and we're adding our corn to it. Again, you can use whatever vegetables you want here. And we're going to cook that for about 10 minutes, making sure to stir it in between. And then we're going to add our rice. Again, I had this left over, but you can of course always cook it fresh. And this is brown rice. If you want to use white rice, you can do that as well. And then we're stirring that well. I have to break it up a little bit because it did sit in the fridge for 2 days. And making sure we're mixing that well, and then we're going to brown that for about 10 minutes or so because I want the rice to warm up and I also want it to be slightly browned. So making sure you give that a mix here and there so that it doesn't stick to the pan. And then lastly, we're crumbling up our tofu. So this is going to be replacing the egg in the fried rice. So we're crumbling up our tofu and we're giving that a good mix. Now I also added just a little bit of red pepper. You can add whatever spices you want to. Giving that a good mix, and then we're cooking that for just a few more minutes just for the tofu to warm up and to brown a little bit as well. And this is what it looked like. For this comforting dish, we're going to need a cauliflower, and I realized that cauliflower is one of those vegetables that varies quite a bit in price. I paid $1.40 for this, so where you live it might be a little bit more expensive. We need a sweet potato, which cost me $1.50. We'll also need some chickpeas. I cooked these in my Instapot, so they were less than 50 cents. We need some turmeric, masala, an onion, some garlic, and just a little bit of the coconut milk, about 1/3 of the can. Of course, we're going to start by peeling our onion as well as our garlic, dicing the onion, mincing the garlic, and then we're going to saute both of it in just a little bit of water. And while the onion and garlic are sauteing, we're going to cut our sweet potato into cubes. And we want to try to get the cubes about the same size so that they cook evenly. So if you have some really big pieces and some smaller pieces, they're not going to cook evenly, so about the same size. We're going to throw that in with the garlic and onion. And we're going to brown that for a few minutes while we are cutting our cauliflower. Now the cauliflower, same thing. We want to try to get the pieces about the same size. So I cut it and then I also used my hands to break it into florets. So see what works best for you. And then we're going to add that to our potato. We're going to add our chickpeas to this. Our coconut milk. Now I'm using about 4 tablespoons here. So we don't want to create a sauce, we just want a little bit of the milk to make sure that it gets a bit of creaminess and that the potatoes and the cauliflower don't stick to the pot. And then we're using our turmeric and our masala. We're going to mix all of that up really well, making sure that everything is covered in the spice. And then we're going to cover it up and cook it until the potatoes and the cauliflower are done, which will take about 25 to 30 minutes. And this is what it looked like. So again, you don't want to have a sauce. You just want to have the coconut milk just to give a little bit of creaminess and make sure nothing sticks. And let me tell you, it was very delicious, and this is a very comforting meal, especially when it is cold outside. For the spicy peanut pasta, we of course need some pasta. I'm using chickpea pasta, which was about $2. You can also use rice noodles here. I am using Brussels sprouts, which were about $1. You could use broccoli if you wanted to. Some natural peanut butter, sriracha, soy sauce, garlic and ginger powder, as well as an onion and some garlic, some fresh garlic. And of course, we're going to start by peeling our garlic and our onion. We're going to dice the onion and mince the garlic, and then we're going to saute that, as always, in just a little bit of water. And while the onion and garlic are sauteing, we're going to clean up our Brussels sprouts and cut them into halves, or if they're really big, cut them into quarters. And then we're going to saute those with the onion and garlic. And we want to really brown those, so we're going to saute those for about 10 minutes or even a little bit longer so they get nice and brown. And in the meantime, we're going to make our sauce. So we're going to use the natural peanut butter. And my peanut butter is pretty thick, so I need quite a bit of hot water here. If yours is more runny, you might not need that much hot water. So we're going to make this a little bit thinner. We're adding our soy sauce, our sriracha, the ginger and the garlic powder. Now this is pretty spicy, so if you don't like it that spicy, use a little bit less sriracha, or even no sriracha if you don't like it spicy. But it was really delicious having it this spicy and then having the creaminess and the little bit of salty and sweetness of the peanut butter. So you want this to be a little bit runny. In the meantime, we're going to cook our pasta. This pasta cooks really fast, took about 5 minutes. And again, you can make this with rice noodles, brown rice noodles. It'll be just as delicious. Once the pasta is done, we're going to add it to our Brussels sprouts, and we're going to, of course, add our sauce to it and giving that all a really good mix. Now you really want to make sure that you're mixing it well, because the pasta is going to be a little bit sticky, so you really want to make sure that that sauce is getting to all the noodles and everything is covered. And this is what it looked like. Now optional, you can add a few peanuts on top to have it a little bit crunchy, and there you go.